Enoch Powell was the most controversial of Tory politicians before Margaret Thatcher. His devotees claimed he was a man of unwavering principle. His detractors, that he represented the respectable face of gutter politics. The former Wolverhampton MP himself says that the thread which runs through his life is his belief in the nation.
In this country, in 15 or 20 years' time, the black man will have the whip hand over the white man. Well, I can already hear the chorus of execration. How dare I say such a horrible thing? How dare I stir up trouble and inflame feelings by repeating such a conversation? My answer is that I do not have the right not to do so.
The issue of race was to bring Powell into confrontation with Heath. Powell decided to quote directly from the experiences with immigrants of his white constituents. Only parts of that polemical speech were filmed, but Powell has kept his original text. He began by attacking the Labour government's bill that outlawed racial discrimination.
The discrimination and the deprivation, the sense of alarm and of resentment lie not with the immigrant population, but with those among whom they have come and are still coming. This is why to enact legislation of the kind before Parliament at this moment is to risk throwing a match onto gunpowder.
Powell quoted a letter he said he'd received about an elderly widow living in Wolverhampton, the only white resident left in her street. He quoted from the letter, "She's becoming afraid to go out. Windows are broken. She finds excreta pushed through her letterbox. When she goes to the shop, she's followed by children, charming, wide-grinning pickaninnies. They cannot speak English, but one word they know, racialist, they chant."
Those whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad. We must be mad, literally mad as a nation, to be permitted the annual inflow of some 50,000 dependents who are for the most part the material of the future growth of the immigrant descended population. It is like watching a nation busily engaged in heaping up its own funeral pyre.
Powell ended the speech with a quote from Virgil translated from Latin. "As I look ahead, I'm filled with foreboding. Like the Roman, I seem to see the river Tiber foaming with much blood." It was that line, not filmed at the time, which gave the speech its Rivers of Blood title. As the storm broke in the press, the Times condemned it as an evil speech, and there were growing demands for Ted Heath to sack Powell from the shadow cabinet. And the Smithfield meat porters marched on Parliament with a petition.
There's 2,026 signatures there to say that Mr. Enoch's right, that we have the right to say who we like and who we don't like. This is not a racial problem. All we say is that we've got enough immigrants into the country and that no more should be allowed in.
Nobody had any idea of the effect that it would have. It touched the spring, a spring which vibrated in the hearts of millions of people in this country.
I recently had an interaction with my fellow YouTuber Millennial Woes on Twitter, and he was mentioning a piece of media from the BBC that was basically intended for teachers, a video to be used as a tool. I'll put it in the description. A video that was supposed to be used as a tool by school teachers to teach children to be tolerant and inclusive in modern multicultural Britain. And you know, you know, Millennial Woes is a fervent white nationalist. And I made the case to him that, number one, you know, teaching children tolerance is a Western value. I don't understand how these white nationalists are saviors of Western values when Western values includes tolerance and inclusion of the other. It's a defining value, actually. And that's aside from the history of colonialism and racial segregation, all that stuff. Those things are all obviously part of it. But I'm speaking to their own paradigm that Western values equal superior values. I'm speaking to what their statement is on Western values. So, you know, I used this Enoch Powell Rivers of Blood speech from 1968 as a bellwether, or I guess like as a marker for, you know, look, I said to him, Enoch Powell made the Rivers of Blood speech in 1968. Your identity apocalypse, your British identity apocalypse is late. By about 50 years. And that's from the date that the speech was given. He foretold that white people would be getting slaughtered in the street, and that the River Thames would be foaming with the blood of white victims. Within 20 years, that white men would be under the lash of black people. And immigrants, I guess, and all the other like people on the hate list of white nationalists. And so, at the very least, according to his, according to racial Nostradamus, Enoch Powell, they were supposed to be a massive Holocaust of white people by non-white people in Britain in 1988, and well. Isn't that very, very late if it was supposed to show up at all? What these white nationalists remind me of with this whole you just wait, the race war really is coming. Black people, immigrants, Muslims, they really are going to annihilate us. They're really going to strike us from existence. And what's funny is that it never comes. And it reminds me of the apocalypse pastors of the evangelical movement. It reminds me of apocalypse cults in general, with their whole, you have to follow me because I'm going to save you from the apocalypse. You have to prepare yourself for the apocalypse because Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming. He was coming 2,000 years ago. He was coming 1,500 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. He was coming 50 years ago, and how long have we been living in the end times? About 2,000 years? I think that end times racial apocalypse rhetoric is about the same in terms of credibility as end times Christian rhetoric. It's so sort of confusing to me that they want to take action to marginalize or harm non-white people for a supposed revolution that has never actually showed up. We've never had a mass killing we've never had a mass revenge killing of white people by non-white people in the West. And to come to think of it, I don't think in modern history that has happened in the third world either. I mean, the closest thing would be slave revolts from the 17 and 1800s. Those are far behind us. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to sort of talk about the Doomsayers, the racial, the nationalist identity Doomsayers that seem to pop up every few years, and how easily debunked they are just by time itself. Just by, they always disallow the good faith argument, right? People like Enoch Powell or George Wallace, who were against racial integration and against non-white immigration, sort of make these bad faith inferences about what black people want from integration. They make these bad faith inferences about what immigrants come to the West for. they always spin this narrative of this is colonial people looking for revenge for all those slights, and they're going to come here and get back at you by fucking your women. They're very preoccupied with that. That's always one of the major talking points. You be careful now, because they're coming for your daughter. And this obviously animates a certain type of eternal frat boy into the street. But every country has these. Every country that has an apartheid system that becomes a post-apartheid system has these. Every empire that, empire creates immigration, because what happens is the Western country comes to your country, and they rob you of all your resources, and they make it impossible to earn a living wage in whatever. I mean, you can even you want to use NAFTA, right? Like, you want to use a modern example of why so many immigrants come from Mexico into the United States. It's NAFTA. It's the fact that, look, immigrants don't have a political agenda when they come to the first world, as it's called. And the same thing with black people who want integration. The kind of immigrants are looking for work, and they're usually driven by desperation. So, for example, the North American Free Trade Agreement collapsed the farming system in Mexico because they flooded the market with cheap corn and rice from the United States of America. So a Mexican farm worker looks at his plight in Mexico and is not thinking he's going to go get revenge on the United States. He thinks to himself, I can't make a living for my family here anymore, so I'm going to have to go to this country on the same landmass that is prosperous. And most immigrants come here and they work and they send money home, and they're very unhappy. This is not the optimal situation. The average immigrant comes to a Western country and they're alienated and it's terrifying, and they come because they don't have a choice. You know what? Most people are not naturally interested in leaving their home, their family, and their friends to go get a job in a strange land where they're going to be alienated of the language and alienated of the culture. But these waves of immigration are caused by colonialist countries making it impossible for you to make a living in your homeland. So, and then they kick, cry, and scream about how you're robbing them of identity and how you're robbing them of sort of a singular, a culture with a singular strain. Yeah, of course, first-generation immigrants are going to want to have a piece of home with them. These people are experiencing very extreme cultural alienation, and they would like, when they form their own communities, they're not necessarily going to reflect the sort of aesthetics and stuff of the mainstream culture. And yet some people within the dominant paradigm see this as a threat. But what I've always said is that integration, racial integration, civic integration is inevitable. So 4 generations in, or 3 generations in, or even usually it takes 1 generation between immigrant parents and their kids to integrate culturally. You know what I mean? But there's always going to be an Enoch Powell talking about how bloodthirsty savages are coming to your country to replace you or fuck you out of existence or take your job. And it's just, it is the doomsayer. It is the apocalypse that never comes, because that's the hustle. That's what keeps preachers in business. How fucked would the doomsayer racket be if Jesus ever actually showed up?